The moment the waiter hit the floor, everyone in the restaurant stopped chewing. The wine glass still trembled where it had tipped, red streaking the white tablecloth like a crime scene. Emily let out a half-gasp, half-laugh, the kind you make when you realize something is very wrong, but your ego refuses to accept it. Bridger, yes, that's his name, adjusted the cuffs of his pinstripe shirt like he hadn't just been hurled across the room seconds earlier. The man was bleeding from the nose. Still smirking. I hadn't touched him. Not yet. Let me rewind about 7 minutes. We were seated at table 14, directly across from the open kitchen, the kind of overpriced culinary theater where they charge you for ambience and lemon zest. I didn't book the reservation. I didn't even know I was coming here. Emily had told me to wear something non-embarrassing and be ready at 7:30. She said she wanted a mature conversation. Right. Instead, I was now staring at the man she'd been sleeping with for at least 3 months, based on the smugness of his posture alone. He hadn't even tried to look uncomfortable. That takes a special breed of arrogance. Walk away, Bridger had said, not 2 minutes before the wine spill. Or fight like a man. Not a threat. A dare. Like we were in a bar somewhere in Texas in 1982. I hadn't stood up. I hadn't raised my voice. I just tilted my head and asked one thing, clear enough for the waiter to hear as he leaned in with the bread basket. How many teeth do you want to keep before I turn this dinner into rubble? Bridger had laughed. Emily had blinked. The waiter had flinched. That was before his foot caught the corner of the chair, and he crashed backward in panic. Not my fault, but it definitely set the tone. Now everyone was watching. Bridger wiped his nose with a linen napkin and said, "You're not going to do a damn thing. Guys like you never do. You fold. That's your type. That's why I'm here." He wasn't wrong, at least about my history. I do fold. I avoid conflict. I say sorry when I didn't do anything wrong. I give people the benefit of the doubt until I'm standing in an ash pile wondering how it caught fire. But tonight wasn't going to follow the script. Emily cleared her throat, finally finding her voice. "Howard, you're making this dramatic." "Dramatic?" I echoed, smiling in a way I didn't recognize. "Emily, the only reason I haven't snapped your boyfriend's collarbone across this risotto is because I haven't finished my bread." The waiter, still on the floor, raised a finger like he wanted to ask if we'd still be ordering entrees. That was the last normal moment of the evening. Because what happened next wasn't even about betrayal anymore. It was about history, and I was about to rewrite mine. There's a strange kind of silence that follows public tension. It's not real silence. The forks still clink, glasses still pour, but it's loaded, like everyone's pretending not to watch while absolutely watching. That's what the restaurant felt like after Bridger wiped his nose and tried to act like he hadn't just been rattled by a man in discount department store shoes. I didn't move from my chair. Didn't yell. Didn't throw anything. But in that exact moment, something cracked inside me. Not a snap, not a breakdown, just a silent, irreversible shift. Like a train easing off one track onto another. I looked at Emily, who was suddenly fidgeting with her necklace, the one I gave her on our 5th anniversary, and I realized something brutal. She wasn't sorry. Not for cheating. Not for bringing me here. Not for humiliating me. She thought this whole thing was a conversation. A choice. A handoff. "You're handling this well," she finally said, trying to sound impressed, like I was some rescued dog who hadn't peed on the rug. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached for my water, calmly sipped, and nodded toward the hallway leading to the restrooms. "Mind if I step out for a moment?" Emily shrugged. Bridger smirked, already assuming I was leaving to cry into my sleeves and return with a half-hearted plea for forgiveness. What I actually did was follow a memory. Earlier that week, I had noticed a strange charge on our joint card, a boutique hotel less than 20 minutes from our house. Emily told me it was a spa day she had with her friend Madeline. I didn't push, but I remembered the address. Why that mattered now was because I had a theory, and to confirm it, I needed to see something. I walked to the back, past the restrooms, and through a door I knew I wasn't supposed to enter. Staff only. I didn't care. I used to service HVAC units in restaurants like this. I knew the layout. I knew where they stored the security feed. No one stopped me. I found the manager's office, knocked once, and opened the door like I had every right to be there. A young guy, probably early 20s, shaved eyebrows, clearly annoyed, looked up from his phone. "I'm with compliance," I lied smoothly. "Health and fire. Random drop-in. Quick peek at the cameras, then I'm gone. You don't want me to come back with forms." He didn't even ask for a badge. Just sighed and spun the monitor toward me. There it was. Clear as day. The live feed of Table 14. Emily and Bridger, alone now, leaning in. Her hand on his. Her eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. Then the guy on the monitor, the same Bridger who told me to walk away or fight like a man, leaned in and said something that made my stomach go cold. He's almost cute when he thinks he still matters. They both laughed. And that's when I saw it. Not the betrayal. That had already happened. Not the cruelty. That was just bonus seasoning. No, I saw a keycard. It slipped out of her purse when she reached for the wine glass. That same boutique hotel. Room 312. So this dinner wasn't even the event. It was the appetizer. I left the office, past the kitchen, and returned to the table with a smile so calm it made Emily pause mid-sentence. "Everything okay?" she asked, now slightly uneasy. I sat down, folded my napkin over my lap, and replied softly, "Everything's perfect. I was just confirming what dessert I'm going to burn to the ground." Bridger raised a brow. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer him. I didn't need to. Because while they were celebrating their victory, they'd made one crucial mistake. They thought I was still playing the same game. And from this point forward, the rules were going to change, permanently. We didn't speak much for the rest of dinner. Bridger kept checking his reflection in his spoon, clearly debating whether to play alpha again or wait for dessert to salvage the evening. Emily, ever the illusionist, tried to steer the conversation into neutral waters. Bills, her upcoming conference, the price of olive oil. It was insulting how normal she tried to make it feel. I smiled. I nodded. I played along. Because everything I needed now lived on that keycard. Room 312. Boutique hotel. The one she thought she had cleaned of any trace. The one she paid for using a separate credit card I hadn't known existed until last week. But she made a mistake, a small one. The kind that only matters when someone's watching closely. We left the restaurant just before 9. She asked if I wanted to go home and talk. Bridger didn't even say goodbye. He strolled off down the street like a man who'd just won a trophy, assuming I'd slink back to the shadows with my tail between my legs. I told her I needed some air. She nodded, probably assuming I'd head to some sad bar, drown in whiskey, and sleep on my friend's couch. She didn't realize I had no intention of going home tonight. I waited until they were gone, circled the block, and called a rideshare under a fake name. 15 minutes later, I was standing in front of the hotel. Minimal signage. Gold trim. A place that tried hard not to be noticed. I stepped inside and walked to the elevator like I owned the building. Confidence is easy when rage becomes your compass. On the way up, I looked at myself in the mirrored panel. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. In fact, I felt more focused than I had in years. There's a kind of clarity that comes when the lies peel away and you finally see the situation for what it is. Not a tragedy, not a misunderstanding. Just war in slow motion. I reached the 3rd floor and walked past room 312 like I didn't care, like I wasn't seconds away from finding out how far down the rabbit hole she'd gone. I doubled back, slid the keycard into the reader, and heard the lock click. No resistance. Just access. The room was clean, almost obsessively so. Lights dimmed, music playing softly from a Bluetooth speaker on the nightstand. Her music, a playlist she'd once told me she only used for unwinding alone. That was a lie too, apparently. I didn't touch anything, didn't open drawers. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed and waited. For 43 minutes. At exactly 9:54 p.m., the door handle rattled. I didn't flinch. It opened. And it wasn't Emily. A woman walked in. Early 30s, sharp jawline, wearing a black trench coat and sunglasses indoors. She froze the second she saw me sitting there. "Who the hell are you?" she asked, reaching into her purse like she was ready to pepper spray me into next week. "Howard," I replied calmly. "The husband." Her entire posture changed. Not fear, recognition. She lowered the purse. "You're that Howard." "What do you mean that Howard?" She sighed, shut the door behind her, and leaned against it like it was the only thing keeping her from collapsing. "You were never supposed to find this room." I stood up slowly, the air around us charged with questions I hadn't even formed yet. "Are you with Bridger?" I asked. She shook her head. "Not anymore." "Emily." A pause. A glance at the bed. "She's not who you think she is," the woman said softly. "And this, all of this, it wasn't just about cheating. It was about erasing you." I didn't speak. I just listened. Because what she told me next made everything else, the affair, the humiliation, even the wine-soaked restaurant, feel like background noise. There was a plan, and I was the final piece. She didn't blink when she said it, just stood there with her arms crossed, back against the door, like she'd been carrying the weight of this truth for months and finally found someone to hand it to. Her name's not Emily, the woman said again, quieter this time. Not legally, not originally, not to the people who actually know her. I didn't move. I didn't argue. I didn't even try to process what she meant. I just stood there in the center of the room, suddenly aware of how staged everything looked. The spotless sheets, the untouched champagne bottle on the nightstand, the perfectly folded towel on the edge of the bed. It was too perfect. Not romantic, controlled, sanitized. She stepped toward me, slower now, cautiously, like I might bolt or shatter. She was born Melinda Carson. Changed her name 6 years ago. Did you meet her 6 years ago, by any chance? My mouth felt dry. Almost 7. Right on schedule. I wanted to call her crazy. I wanted to say this was some kind of sick prank. But in my gut, I knew better. There had always been pieces of Emily, Melinda, that never fit. The closed-off past, the avoidance of family, the sudden job changes, the conveniently timed layoffs, the obsession with controlling finances even though she claimed to hate money. I sat down on the bed again, not because I was tired, because I felt the floor of my life tilting beneath me. Why are you telling me this? I asked. She hesitated, then walked to the chair near the window, sat down, and finally removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were sharp, not broken, not vengeful. Focused, trained, because I used to be her. I stared at her, not understanding. She clarified. 3 years ago, different city, different name. She was my business partner. We ran an event company. Weddings, mostly. One day she cleaned out our accounts and disappeared. Stole every client, every dollar, every file. Left me with lawsuits, tax debt, and a burned reputation. She leaned forward. But she didn't just run. She reinvented herself. Got new ID, new social, new everything. Then she married you. And guess what? Her voice dropped into a whisper. She used your identity to build her next scam. My stomach turned. What kind of scam? She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder. Yes, an actual folder, like this was a courtroom drama, and dropped it on the bed. I've been following her for over a year. Private investigator wouldn't touch it, so I did it myself. Inside that folder? 3 bank accounts with your name. You don't even know they exist. 2 corporate shells registered in states you've never set foot in. 1 life insurance policy with your signature forged on it. I opened the folder. It was all there. Copies, statements, signatures, even a photo of Emily, no, Melinda, in a suit at what appeared to be a notary's office, holding the documents like a trophy. I felt like I was going to throw up. She's going to vanish again, the woman said. Probably within the next 2 weeks. Bridger's not the endgame. He's just the distraction. She'll make you look unstable, claim financial abuse, get the sympathy story, then drain everything you've built and ghost you like the rest. My hands were shaking now, but not from fear. From fury. You said she did this before? 3 times, she nodded. Different men, different names, but the same routine. She breaks them quietly, then walks away squeaky clean. She knows the law, knows how to keep it just under the radar. I closed the folder slowly. And why are you helping me now? She stood, walked to the door, and looked over her shoulder. Because you're the first one who didn't just disappear. You didn't fall apart. You showed up. That means you still have leverage. She opened the door. One more thing, she added before stepping out. Tomorrow morning, she's going to meet a lawyer for coffee. She'll call it mediation. Don't go. That's when she files false reports to begin the smear campaign. Instead, do exactly what I write in the envelope under the mattress. And then she left, just like that. And I was alone again, but not powerless this time. Because suddenly, I had a war map. And Emily, or Melinda, had no idea I was learning how to use it. I didn't move for a full 10 minutes after the door closed behind her. I just sat there, staring at the edge of the mattress, where she said I'd find the envelope. My mind played tricks on me. Was it real? Was this whole night some elaborate hallucination, the final act of a man unraveling? But curiosity has a way of pulling you forward, even when reason tries to hold you back. I reached under the mattress and pulled out a thick, unsealed envelope. It wasn't labeled. No return address. Just plain, beige paper with the kind of rigidity that suggested it had been placed there deliberately, maybe even ceremonially. Inside were 4 things: a burner phone, a single hotel room keycard labeled for 13, a slip of paper with a handwritten message, and a printed map of what looked like a marina. The note read, "Don't confront her. Don't warn her. Follow the plan. 10:45 a.m. sharp. Room 413 answers everything." No signature. Just that. I checked the burner phone. It was already active, prepaid, with one unsaved number in the call history. I didn't dial it. Not yet. I needed time to think. I was walking through a storm and just beginning to see how long it had been building behind my back. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't paralyzed by it. I left the hotel quietly, blending into the street crowd like I hadn't just uncovered a conspiracy that could burn everything down. The city looked different now, colder, sharper. I noticed things, patterns, people who watched without blinking. I wasn't paranoid, but something inside me had turned on, like a light that couldn't be shut off anymore. I didn't go home. That wasn't safe. Not because of physical danger, but because Emily had likely already begun the setup. The moment I left dinner without crawling back to beg or fight Bridger in some primal parking lot showdown, she would have flipped the narrative in her head. I could already hear her words forming. He's unstable. He threatened us. He's always had anger problems. She was laying the groundwork. I needed to move faster. By morning, I had secured a week-long stay in a cheap extended-stay motel under a different name. I used the burner phone to book a ride to the other hotel, the one tied to room 413. My heart thudded against my ribs the entire elevator ride up. Something about this room felt heavier than the last. It wasn't about secrets anymore. It was about confirmation. The key slid in smoothly. I opened the door and froze. The room wasn't empty. Inside sat an older man, maybe mid-60s, gray beard, thin frame, but eyes like cold steel. He looked up from the chair by the window, nodded once like he'd been expecting me, then motioned to the other chair across from him. "You're Howard," he said. It wasn't a question. "Depends on who's asking." He smirked. "Good answer. My name's Arthur. I was her husband 12 years ago." The room didn't spin, but my throat went dry. I sat slowly, eyes never leaving his face. "She went by Jenna when she was with me," he continued. "Ran a home staging business. Got awards. Built a brand. Then one morning I woke up to an empty house, drained accounts, and a fraud investigation with my name on it." He pulled out a small leather notebook from his coat pocket and handed it to me. "Been tracking her ever since." I flipped through the pages. Dates, cities, bank names, aliases. It wasn't a journal. It was a war dossier. She changes names, changes men, builds empires on their backs, then burns it all to the ground when it's time to vanish. My hands tightened around the notebook. "So why are you helping now?" Arthur looked out the window, face hard. "Because she made one mistake with you she never made with the rest of us." "What's that?" "She stayed too long." He leaned in closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "And that means she got careless. That means we can catch her before she cuts the parachute." I stared at him. "You say we. So what? This is a team effort now." He smiled without humor. "No, Howard. This is a recovery mission. And we've only got days left before she makes the drop." He stood up, slid a manila envelope into my hand, thicker than the last. "She's meeting someone at the marina tomorrow. Not Bridger. Not a lawyer. Someone else. You'll be there. Hidden. Recording everything." I looked up. "And then what?" He opened the door, one foot already in the hallway. "Then you decide how much of your life you want back, and how much fire you're willing to walk through to get it." The door shut behind him. And just like that, I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a man preparing to go to war. I arrived at the marina at 10:41 a.m. I remember the time exactly because my heart wouldn't let me forget it. Every second felt like a drumbeat in my neck. Arthur had circled the location on the map in thick red ink. Dockside West, Pier 7. From the parking lot, the place looked peaceful. Birds skimming the water. A couple in windbreakers walking a dog. You'd never guess a fraud artist was about to meet her next mark, or make her last mistake. I stayed in the car at first, windows cracked, burner phone in my lap, backpack beside me with the gear Arthur gave me, a voice recorder disguised as a key fob, a micro camera in a ball cap, and a file I hadn't opened yet. My mind was swirling with too many what-ifs. What if this wasn't real? What if Arthur was just another player in some twisted revenge fantasy? What if Emily somehow knew I was watching? But doubt has an expiration date. At 10:44, I got out and walked toward the docks. There were no boats, no sails flapping in the wind, no engines humming, no clinking metal, just empty slips and an eerie stillness that didn't match the weather. I kept walking until I reached Pier 7, an old wooden extension with a private sign that had long since faded to gray. And then I saw her, Emily, or Melinda, or Jenna, or whatever name she'd be using next. She was standing near the edge of the pier, back turned to me, wearing a pale blue coat I didn't recognize. She looked different in daylight, colder, sharper, like her face was carved from intention, not emotion. She was holding something, a slim, rectangular briefcase. I ducked behind a storage shed near the end of the dock, slipped on the cap with the cam, and pressed record. 10 seconds later, a black SUV pulled up beside the marina's service road. Out stepped a man I had never seen before. Tall, trim, bald, impeccably dressed in a navy suit that didn't belong anywhere near salt water. Emily turned to greet him. They didn't hug. No handshake. Just a subtle nod like two agents confirming a drop. "I don't want more delays," the man said. His voice was calm, clipped, almost European. "You'll get everything once the final transfer clears," she replied. The man narrowed his eyes. "And the husband?" She smirked. "Taken care of. He thinks we're still in the emotional sabotage phase. Hasn't figured out the rest." I gritted my teeth so hard I nearly cracked a molar. "I want a clean break," she continued. "No mess, no public trail, no lawsuits. If he talks, he looks insane. If he runs, he looks guilty. Either way, I walk out clean." "And the shell companies?" he asked. She handed him the briefcase. "Everything's in here. Paper trail ends in Belize. After that, we ghost." The man opened the case, checked the contents, documents, passports. I couldn't see it all, then gave a satisfied nod. "Good. Your cut will be wired by end of day. This is the last one, right?" Emily didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out across the marina, into the empty blue horizon, and said, "I think so. I'm tired of playing puppet master. Too many strings to cut." The man turned, walked back to the SUV, and drove off. Emily stood alone for a moment, her posture sinking for the first time since I'd been watching. Then she reached into her coat, pulled out a phone, not hers, and threw it into the water. It sank without a splash. That was when I realized something that chilled me deeper than the betrayal. This wasn't just about money. It was about vanishing. Completely. Burn the records. Poison the history. Walk into a new life like the last one never existed. And I was never supposed to survive long enough to watch her do it. I turned and walked quickly back to the car, not bothering to hide anymore. She didn't see me. Or if she did, she didn't react. I drove away, adrenaline spiking, throat dry, mind spinning. Back at the motel, I opened the last file Arthur had given me. Inside was a copy of a financial power of attorney. My name, her signature, filed 3 months ago in a county I'd never visited. It gave her full control of my assets. Even if I died. Especially if I died. And right then, I stopped thinking this was a betrayal, and started wondering if it was an assassination. Sleep didn't come that night. Not even a little. I lay in that cheap motel bed with the sheets still stiff from industrial detergent, my back to the wall, one eye on the door, and the burner phone gripped tight in my palm like a lifeline. Every time I closed my eyes, I didn't see her face. I saw the marina. I saw the calm, methodical way she orchestrated my erasure, as if she'd done it dozens of times and barely remembered the names anymore. Around 2 a.m., I thought I heard someone testing my doorknob. Just one rattle, soft, deliberate. I held my breath and waited. Nothing followed. No footsteps. No knock. But I didn't sleep after that. At 6:32 a.m., the burner buzzed. Unknown number. One line of text. "They're watching your car. Ditch it." I didn't hesitate. I left everything behind but the notebook Arthur gave me, the file folder, and the key fob recorder. I wiped the motel room of prints, tossed the burner into a truck stop dumpster 30 miles out, and hitched a ride with a guy named Tucker who didn't ask questions and offered me a boiled egg from his glove box. I told him I was in the middle of a messy divorce. He just nodded like that explained everything. I spent the next 4 hours off-grid. No phone, no cards, just gas station coffee and a paper map I hadn't used since college. The more time passed, the more I realized how isolated I really was. No one had called to check on me. No friends. No family. I had become invisible before I even realized she'd lit the match. At 11:18 a.m., I found a cafe downtown with a second-floor window seat and a perfect view of the intersection below. I needed to watch. Not for Emily. For whoever came next. Arthur had warned me she never works alone for long. There's always someone in the periphery, the closer. The one who handles the fallout while she fades into a new name, a new state, a new victim. That's when I saw him. Red hoodie, tan pants, hands in pockets, pacing. Not erratic, calculated. Like he was waiting for a bus that never came. He didn't look up often, but when he did, it was always toward the building. Always toward me. I was sure of it. I hadn't told anyone where I was. I hadn't used my real name in 72 hours. But someone had found me anyway. I left cash for the coffee and slipped out the back. I weaved through alleyways, cut through a bookstore, exited through a fire door, and crossed 3 blocks before I allowed myself to stop and breathe. When I did, I checked my surroundings. He was gone, but I knew the message had been sent. I was still being tracked. By 3 p.m., I was in a library computer lab using a public terminal to dig through everything I could on Melinda Carson. Not Emily. Not Jenna. Melinda. The woman I now knew was more ghost than human. And what I found made me cold. There were mentions of a Melinda L. Carson in 3 separate federal lawsuits across 2 states, all sealed. No public details. No outcomes. No media coverage. Just a name on paper that quietly disappeared months later. And each time, she resurfaced somewhere else, under a new name, with a new business, often with a new partner who magically vanished after a bankruptcy, a fire, or a legal settlement. But this wasn't just about theft. This was architectural. She built identities like blueprints, laid foundations of lies, and demolished lives when the roof was finally screwed in tight. And then I stumbled across something that didn't make sense, a forum post from 2 years ago. Anonymous. Short. Unverified. It read, "If you're reading this and her name is Melinda, run." Her ex didn't vanish. He was erased. If you think it's love, check the walls. She leaves microphones. I stared at the screen for a long time. Check the walls. Paranoia, right? But when I got back to the second motel room I'd paid cash for earlier that day, I sat in silence for over an hour. Listening. Not to the outside world, but to inside. The silence felt wrong. Waited. Like the air wasn't settling naturally. I stood slowly, walked to the bedside lamp, and unscrewed the bottom cap. Inside was a small black capsule. A listening device. Still warm. That's when I realized I was no longer trying to expose her. I was trying to survive her. And I had one shot left to take control before she buried me under a story no one would ever question. Tomorrow. One location. One name. And a plan I hadn't shared with anyone. Not even Arthur. Because if she was listening, she wouldn't hear what I'd planned until it was too late. The sun was barely rising when I stood outside the courthouse steps, the manila envelope pressed to my chest like a shield. Inside it was everything: forged signatures, shell companies, the offshore transfers, the fake power of attorney. More than enough for the assistant district attorney to take interest. The meeting had been scheduled by Arthur through an old contact. Quiet, off record, but real. And finally, I wasn't alone. Arthur arrived 15 minutes later with the same worn coat, a thermos of coffee, and a look in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not in him, not in me, not in any of the other men she'd left behind in ruins. It was resolve. He nodded once. "You're doing it." I nodded back. "I'm done being quiet." The ADA's office was clinical, sterile, but the assistant on duty, a sharp-eyed woman named Maritza, took one look at the file and asked us to sit down. For 2 hours, we went through the timeline, the names, the recordings, the photos. I showed her the burner phone logs, the offshore bank slips, and the security footage Arthur had compiled. I gave her everything. And when I was done, she asked only one thing. "Do you feel safe going home tonight?" "No," I told her. "But I finally feel like I'm not walking in the dark." Later that afternoon, I received confirmation that a temporary financial freeze had been placed on every known asset under her aliases. The life insurance policy was nullified. The forged documents flagged. She wouldn't be able to move a dime without triggering red flags from 4 different departments. But it didn't stop there. That evening, as she returned home, expecting to find a silent house, a sad husband, maybe a carefully placed goodbye letter. She found a team of investigators instead. They were waiting in the driveway. 2 from financial crimes, 1 from the IRS, and Arthur, sitting on the hood of a car, arms folded, just watching. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She smiled. Of course she smiled. That was her last defense. Charm. But no one was buying it this time. I wasn't there for the arrest. I didn't need to be. Instead, I drove out to a small town 2 hours north, where a friend of Arthur's owned a cabin off the grid. No phones, no wires, just trees and air and silence that didn't hide anything. For the first time in months, I sat still. I listened to the wind and not my own panic. I let the quiet feel like safety instead of threat. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail, not from her, from one of the other men. A quiet thank you. He'd found out about the investigation and decided to come forward too. Turns out, there were more of us than I thought. And now, one by one, we were rebuilding. Brick by brick. Life by life. As for me, I've started over. Different city. Different job. I still have scars, financial, emotional, even spiritual. But there's something beautiful about surviving a person who thought they had written your ending. I live simply now. I cook for myself. I hike. I read. I don't flinch at my own reflection anymore. And every once in a while, when I catch a glimpse of someone in a crowd who looks like her, sharp eyes, fast smile, I don't feel rage. I feel lucky. Because I walked away with my name, my sanity, and something she'll never have again. Peace.